Hello students, this is Miss Dalton and this video is over different types of indices. So what is an index? A number on a defined scale used to make comparisons among values, to see trends over time or to compare a value to some fixed reference point or reference number. Some examples of indices are the Consumer Price Index, the Consumer Confidence Index, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, Gunning Fog Index, and the Flesch-Kincaid Grade Level Index. The two that we're going to talk about in this video are these last two, the Gunning Fog Index and the Flesch-Kincaid. The Gunning Fog Index, we just abbreviate it, the GFI index. And then the Flesch-Kincaid is just abbreviated FKGLI. And so what these two indices measure is on this next slide. The GFI and the FKGLI are indices that are used to determine a passage's reading level. For example, reading passages in books are marked at a certain grade level, like grade 8.2 means 8th grade, second month. So we have formulas for both of these indices. You need to make sure that these formulas are written down in your journal. You will be given them on a test, but for the quiz, I will expect you to have them in your journal. So make sure you copy them down correctly. The biggest difference between these two is the GFI is based on, it takes into consideration complex words, but the FKGLI takes into consideration syllables. So you'll see a difference between those two. The other thing I want you to write down is that a complex word is a word that has 3 syllables or more. All right, so we're going to practice using these two formulas on this passage that is from the book 1984 by George Orwell. Take a second and just read through this passage, and then I want you to practice writing down. First, write down the number of words. Now, I usually do this by line, so you can see that right here I've written down the number of words on each line. And then also try and write down the syllables. I wrote the syllables here. See if you can match up those numbers. So I'll give you a second to read through here, and then we'll talk about how you're going to use this on the formula. Okay, so it may seem silly to some, but I always have questions on the syllables. Like, how can you really tell whether some words, it's hard to tell whether it's, one or more syllables. Like, for example, this word boiled in the first line. Boiled, some people might say that's just 1 syllable. But if you say it a little bit slower, boy-old, it comes out to be 2 syllables. In the grand scheme of things, when you do your formula, if you're off by 1 syllable, it's not going to affect the formula very much. So just try and do the best that you can. In this first line, I've divided it into syllables. So it's going to seem kind of silly, but you can kind of say it out loud, say it real slowly. So the hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats at one end of. So if you count all of those syllables, that first line has 17 syllables. Now if you count the words in that first line, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And so you can see that at the end here, that should be, let me do that better so that I'm not covering up the 1. It would be 14. So after you've done that for each line, you can add up all of the syllables. You should get 244 syllables in this passage. And when you add up the number of words, it comes out to be 177 words in this passage. Then you want to count sentences. And so, look for periods, look for question marks, exclamation points. So count up the number of sentences. In this passage, there's 11. And then the complex words. Now, the complex words here are highlighted. Enormous has 3 syllables, so that would be considered a complex word. Electric, 3 syllables. Economy, 4 syllables. Preparation, 4 syllables. Varicose, 3. Several, 3. Opposite, 3. Enormous, 3. So each of those words would be considered a complex word. So there's a total of 8 complex words. Okay, so now we're going to use the formulas. For the GFI, here is how you would plug in those values. And so when you multiply that all out, it comes out to be 8.24. Now, if we look at the FK GLI, when we insert all of the values, it comes out to be an index of 7. So if we're basing it off the GFI, that would be considered an 8th grade level in maybe the 2nd month. But if we look at the FK GLI, they're saying it's more of a 7th grade level. Again, you need to be able to use both of these formulas and be able to analyze a passage. So we're going to do a practice one. If you look at this passage here in part A, I want you to start with the word weighted. And I want you to go ahead and read through that and try and go ahead and write down how many sentences there are, how many words there are, and how many syllables. And then you also want to write down how many complex words there are. Once you have done that, I want you to check your work with what they have listed here. And then use the 2 formulas to figure out the average. And if you've done it correctly, it should match what they have here. If you need another one to practice with, then you can look at part B. There is another passage. It's kind of the same passage, but it's just written a little bit differently. And so look at the comparison. How can we change that first passage in part A and then rewrite it into part B to be a little bit more with a lower grade point, grade level index. So use these 2 passages to practice on. Again, you can check your answer for part B here. And if you're good with everything, then that is the end of the notes. So just make sure that you have those formulas written into your notes. Make sure that you understand how to find the syllables. That tends to be the part that's a little bit more difficult. And if you have any questions, please let me know.